All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub Podcast. This is our flagship show dedicated to sharing the multitude of astrological perspectives and approaches so that you can experience all of the different ways that astrology can help you in your life. I'm thrilled to be here today with Nura Rachelle, intuitive astrologer, for her Astrology Hub debut. This is always so exciting to introduce you to new astrologers in the field and just get to know them and their style, their approach. And we're going to be talking mainly today about 2022. So looking ahead into 2022, we're here at the end of 2021, and it's time to start looking forward and seeing what the astrology of next year has in store for us and how we can prepare body, mind, and spirit for what's to come. So Nura, so happy you're here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to share with you and converse with you about this big year ahead we have.
Oh gosh, big year. Okay, here we go. All right. I just wanted to share a little bit more about Nura in case this is your first time meeting her. She is an intuitive astrologer who draws from many knowledge branches, including evolutionary, esoteric, and traditional Western astrology for deepening self-awareness. She integrates herbalism, movement practices, and intuitive skill building in her consulting and educational work. Love all of that, Nura, and can't wait to ask you more about that as well. But let's start with your story. Tell us how you came to become a practicing astrologer. What led you here?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. I think it really vibes with my North Node and Pisces in the 11th house. I swear, I can walk around a corner or into a group of people and all of a sudden there's some sort of connection and then I'm guided towards something. So I really trust my guidance and I trust where I'm led. So really, I was led to astrology. And it really started probably, I've been studying it since I was about 16 years old, and probably when I should have been writing other papers and doing other homework, this is what I was doing.
Nice.
Yeah, so it all started there. And then I found that the more I got into it, I was like, wow, there's so much more. It's kind of like the more you know, the more you don't know. So of course, Sag Sun here, the more questions you have. And I just kept going with it until I was about 23. So a solid like 7-8 years went by where I was just, using it just for myself. I started doing like readings for fun for friends. And they decided to share with all of their friends. So it just kind of built itself like that. And then they're like, yeah, you should just, see if you can do this as a thing. And then I started taking some other courses at that time and took it a little bit more seriously, second Jupiter return around 23, 24. And then I've been doing it ever since. So it's been a couple Venus cycles that I've been immersed in astrology, and I anticipate it'll be a lifelong student learning situation.
Probably, right? When you were 16, was astrology kind of normalized, or was that a weird thing for you to be into?
Oh, it was totally weird. Yeah.
Yeah. So like for your family and your friends, you were the one that was into something out there.
Yeah. And it took me a while to appreciate, I'm an Aquarius moon as well. So it took me a while to understand the gift of being like that person who's exploring the fringe. Because I was kind of always pulled between that, like, okay, what's exciting to me and what is, helping me to connect with my soul's calling. And then what is this sort of societal expectation of me, to go to school and like get this kind of job and do these things. So I was like living a double life where I was trying to have both at the same time. Like I went and did a lot of the traditional schooling job things. And then I had this like closet astrology life on the other side. So I'm really grateful that eventually those two
merged.
kind of merged together. Yeah.
And I'd love to ask you about this as we look into the future astrologically. It seems like new forms of education and new forms of learning are definitely going to continue emerging. I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on that as we look forward into the astrology.
Well, when I hear you say that, a lot comes up for me around different paradigms for learning. So, an example of that, I actually went to school to be a teacher. I have a certification as a public school teacher, and I did that for a few years, and I really loved it. I love working with people, but I found that, especially when I was working with teen years, there was this sort of missing component of, initiation, rites of passage, like knowing why you might be supported on a certain path, or receiving different kinds of validation or affirmation for your path. So I started working more with teens on those kinds of things. I started slipping the astrology into it, not, like very quietly, very subtly, but, helping to guide people to what was already naturally emerging in themselves. So I would really love to see more of that in the everyday lexicon, where people are asking those questions of, what am I here to do? What do I really enjoy? What are my gifts? What are my strengths? What can I add to this world based on something that I love, rather than any element of should?
Yes.
Or societal obligation. So that's something that has been really, I'm hopeful with, especially when Pluto moves into Aquarius in 2024. I'm excited to see what happens there. I feel like, we've been on this really wild ride of deconstructing and evaluating everything about society from top to bottom. So I think we're on the verge, and like education is just one branch of that. But I feel like we're going to see everything completely shift into this more open sort of direction.
I agree. And that, one of the things that you focus on is using astrology for greater self-awareness. And I can't think of anything more important for those teenage years but then to cultivate that level of self-awareness. Like you said, who am I? What am I doing here? What do I love? What can I contribute? Those are huge questions that it'd be amazing if astrology could help facilitate those conversations. And I know even with my own children, they're younger than teenagers still, but actually one's about to be a teenager, that it provides a language where we can have those conversations that's different than like, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's really different. It gives so much more nuance to the language and to the dialogue. So, yes. Okay. So Nura, let's talk about 2022. What are you looking at? What are the major transits? What would you say is the theme for the year? Like, let's just look into that a little bit.
So when I'm looking at a year, I like to know what's going on with Saturn and Jupiter kind of as my cornerstones first. Saturn, because he stays in the sign for, 2.5, 3 years, if you include the retrogrades. And so there's something with Saturn that we can really root ourselves in, sort of this long-term goal, this long-term unfolding. And then Jupiter stays in a sign for about a year. So I'm always looking first at them too. So Saturn right now in Aquarius, I'm thinking, okay, we have really only just begun working with this Aquarian energy. There's so many new ideas, new pathways, new trajectories, new technologies, new ways of thinking, new ways of organizing society. It's kind of like this simultaneous deconstruction and building up of something new at the same time with this Saturn. And I think, working with Saturn is so multifaceted because he represents things that we can be afraid of, energies where there might be some insecurity around. So because there's an insecurity, we want to work on it more. So I think looking at where we have Saturn transiting in our charts, and then also kind of comparing and contrasting that to what's going on out in the world, it actually is very helpful to refine our purpose of the moment, or our dharma for the moment. Like we can kind of focus in and be like, okay, this is what if I focus on this, I'm likely to bring more security into my life. I'm likely to feel more mastery. And everybody, I'm sure, can, resonate with wanting more of all of that. So the Saturn in Aquarius, I think, coupled with, we have the Pluto return in the United States. There's a few of these sort of iconic, I guess, new societal, I would say religion, but I don't like that word and I don't mean it that way, but it's kind of this like new perspective, a new paradigm for society that we're witnessing unfold, but it feels very experimental in Aquarius. Like, it doesn't feel like it's set. It doesn't feel like we know even what it is. So we're just kind of in that observation phase. It's kind of like, well, what does a scientist do when you have an experiment? You hypothesize, you try a couple things. We're in the middle of a few experiments right now. And then you come back, you take it back, you assess, you evaluate what's working, what's not working, and then you try again, maybe with new information. So I think we're in this social experiment that we haven't even come to the end of it yet. And we haven't quite decided what we want to build yet, because I think it's a collective effort. So that's the Saturn in Aquarius piece. And then Jupiter has been in Aquarius, has dipped into Pisces. It's going to come back into Pisces after this retrograde period. He's going to be in Pisces for most of 2022, all of 2022. And in Hellenistic astrology or traditional astrology, Jupiter has that rulership of Pisces. So there's a really strong energy here that I think is going to feel a little bit smoother than it has felt with Jupiter in Aquarius, because Jupiter is kind of, the king of making everything bigger. So putting the magnifying glass on all of the issues, putting the emphasis, make it bigger so it's impossible to say that you didn't see it.
Oh yeah, that's definitely happening.
Yeah.
And how is that different in Pisces versus Aquarius? Like what will Jupiter be blowing up or emphasizing in Pisces?
I have a few thoughts on that. So with the Aquarius, I feel like it's been a lot of the intellectual rhetoric, like the conversation has been really blown up. We've become aware of just how many different perspectives there are, how many different ways truth is defined, because that's Jupiter. He talks about truth and how we connect to our beliefs. And also in our personal charts, we can look at Jupiter to give us guidance around our higher self aspirations. But I think we can do that when we're looking at collective transits as well. Like, what is the collective higher self aspiration? So in Aquarius, it feels like it's been, okay, we need to expand our awareness of, objectivity and being in an experiment and being accountable and all of these things that are, part of being, a scientist of our own lives. And so in Pisces, it seems to me like it'll be taken to this more universal space, more spiritual connection, more opening of the big questions, this timeless truth, sort of universal connection, cosmic unity, all of these kinds of words. And I think that would be experienced on quite the spectrum. Something that I've been noticing is a lot of healing around addictions. So there's a big, sobriety movement that I've noticed, where maybe it was more popular before to make your parties centered around like drinking alcohol or something. But that's, at least in my circles, and at least in what I've seen that less and less and less. Like, there's more of this emphasis on, okay, we want to come together and create something, or we want to come together and kind of, do something like yoga, or, do something where we're building each other up and we're really present and we're incorporating this sort of greater collective meta narrative rather than kind of being in our own little boxes. So in that way, I'm really hopeful, because I'm witnessing a lot more of this desire for people to come together.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's amazing. And I'm happy that you're reflecting that or reporting that from your world. Because when I moved from New York to Hawaii about how many years ago now? 8 years ago. New York was very much centered around partying. I mean, that's what you did. You went out, you drank, you always had alcohol at dinner. It was very much part of the culture. And if you didn't, you were very, people thought you were pregnant or something was wrong,
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Hawaii, it was amazing to see that it wasn't the focus of social activities. It was, sometimes it was there, but it wasn't like we're getting together to drink. And it was such an interesting adjustment. But what I realized is it freed up so much time and space and energy for other things. So I can see how what's happening right now in the world is giving people an opportunity to go, well, God, where are all the places I've distracted myself? Where are all the places that I've allowed myself to be kind of stuck? And what else is opening up? What other avenues are opening up, and how can I design my life around that? So I think that's really beautiful that you're seeing that in your world too.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. I think that's what Jupiter can give us, is this inspiration to a new way of perceiving reality, and something that's really come to me in my own journey. I have my North Node in Pisces, so I'm always exploring this. And so Jupiter's kind of close, hanging out near my North Node when he moves into Pisces. And I've been reflecting a lot on like my state of mind and how my natural, organic, God-given, goddess-given state of mind is the best one. It's where I'm the most intelligent. It's where I have the most clarity, the most coherence, because I feel like a lot of people, when we're searching for something, some sort of spiritual vision, it's this idea that like you take a substance to kind of get closer to God or get closer to the spiritual side, versus doing, it from the inside out. So I have definitely no judgment, towards any of the plant medicines. I think they're wonderful. I think they can be these catalysts towards greater growth, but I've just come to be aware that in myself, I have that. So that's been a Jupiterian gift for me. Because I don't know if you've heard this, but like Jupiter being like Santa Claus, like he'll leave you a gift, but it's kind of like you really do have to show that you are in integrity with yourself. Like you might have to leave something behind so that you can receive that gift. So wherever you have Jupiter either moving through Aquarius or into Pisces in your chart, it's kind of like, well, what do you need to release so that you can have this gift of a higher, more expanded perception? And yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so we have Saturn in Aquarius all year. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then we have Jupiter in Pisces all year. And then what else are you looking at for 2022?
So the nodes, the nodal shift, I think is going to be really, I was talking a little bit about this earlier with Jamie, how right now we've got the nodes in Gemini, Sagittarius, and there's been a lot of this intellectual back and forth, right? Like cognitive dissonance, what's true, what's not true. Where to put my attention, what kind of questions do I have, and just kind of this like never-ending rabbit hole of information, it feels like. And so we've been all on this sort of intellectual journey, and I think it's really opened up a lot. But then when we move into Taurus, Scorpio, there's the elemental shift from air, fire with Gemini, Sagittarius into earth, water with Taurus, Scorpio. And I think those being more yin signs, your yin elements coming into the self, really being able to integrate and find groundedness with all of the information that we've taken in. So it's always, dependent on where you have it in your chart to see how it'll influence you as an individual. But all of it feels like this opportunity to really see, okay, what routines in my life do I maybe need to shift with Taurus? Where are my priorities? What am I valuing based on all that I've learned now? Because you might have noticed this, there have been these like complete 180 shifts, whether you're talking, political opinions, those have completely shifted, people's lives based on starting out, the Gemini Sagittarius cycle in one job and then ending in a completely different place. A lot of people have moved locations. So it's like we're literally in a different world, and then we need to land and ground. So that's really what I'm feeling into with the Taurus Scorpio.
And which one is the North Node and which one's the South Node?
North Node in Taurus, South Node in Scorpio.
Okay, so North Node in Taurus. And so what would be I always love looking at both the higher invitation, so to speak, but also the places where we can get trapped. And I think that's been really clear with this last nodes, the Gemini Sag, where we can get trapped. And I love what you just said about it's been very much in the mind. It's been very intellectual. It's been very much about information. And what I've noticed as we're coming to this nodal shift is that the more I can keep my dialogue with people, especially people that have different perspectives than mine, in the heart and out of the head, the better. So it's like we can keep going back and forth here in the head and we're actually going to get nowhere. And if we can drop down and find a connection point in our shared humanity in that heart space, we'll be much better off. But it's taken this whole nodal like experience to get to that place of like, oh, look, there's only so far we can go with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. I'm always bringing myself back to that question. How can I filter this through the heart? And also like my whole body too.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it seems like it's just so normalized to just live in this tiny little section.
Totally. Yes, it is. I think there's some sort of feeling of safety for us there. I think that there's like a known reality there that we feel safe and secure and sort of like we can get behind. And when you drop it into the rest of the body, into the heart, into like these other spaces, it's definitely more vulnerable. And there's definitely that feeling of being a little bit less sure, and
Absolutely.
I think that's really hard for us humans to do, especially as we have lived most of our time in being trained to be in our minds.
And you bring up such a good word, that vulnerability, I think is going to be one of the keystones of the South Node in Scorpio, because that's a major way that we can learn Scorpio lessons. So every archetype has a spectrum, right? There can be, the wounded shadow side. There can be like the wisdom and the light side or the gift expression. And so with Scorpio, a lot of times the shadow side is, not trusting, not wanting to open up, not wanting to share anything, not wanting to be vulnerable because of the fear of getting hurt, because of the fear of being betrayed or, having pain, basically. And that's something that when working through the Scorpio sort of transition, you start to gain this access to this alchemy when you allow yourself to be vulnerable. And of course, with somebody that has, you've developed trust with, you can show yourself bit by bit and you start to see this transformation before your eyes where, maybe you were acting from this place of like, well, I'm afraid that I'm going to get hurt. So I'm not going to show this light. I'm afraid that I'm going to be rejected or, betrayed. So I'm just not going to share myself with somebody. And so it kind of it can become very alienating, kind of like you're alone. I think everything has its cycle and its gift expression in every part of the cycle, even if it's hard to see sometimes. So like if somebody's in that space where they feel like it's very hard to trust or to open up, it's kind of feeling like you're alone. The invitation, I think, is to go into the cave at that time, like to let it be okay. Like this is where emotional processing comes in, Scorpio being that water sign. It's like, go into the cave, allow the emotions that are coming up. A very easy process that I've been working with is just, okay, this fear is here. Hello, fear. Thank you for showing me, thank you for trying to keep me safe, right? Because that's what our fear is doing when it's blocking us from expressing or doing something, or maybe we feel paralyzed in fear. Well, it's because we're trying to stay safe. And so we could say, thank you, fear. Thank you for keeping me safe. This fear is welcome here. And then that statement, like this fear is welcome here, it immediately starts to shift the dynamic, because instead of it becoming like this inner battle of like, okay, no, I have to be only happy, only confident, only strong, only these like preferred states over here, and I'm going to totally pretend that I never have a shadow moment. It kind of creates this split inside where we start to not trust ourselves and we start to not trust our experience or not trusting our emotions as these messengers, as these guides. So when we welcome the feeling, we're saying, hey, I would love to learn from you. I would love to work with you. I respect your intelligence. I respect whatever it is that you're trying to do for me. Kind of similar to how you would do inner child work. It's like, what can I do to support you? What kind of information do you need to feel safe? Like you just have a dialogue and a conversation from that space. So I think we'll see a lot of that happening with the South Node in Scorpio as we learn these more emotional processing tools. And so after you get beyond that, I welcome this emotion, hopefully taking a couple deep breaths, kind of seeing it transmute through the body and through the experience, then you can start asking, okay, like what's the next step? Or what's, this immediate small tiny action that I can take to change something? Because sometimes where I notice a lot of people get stuck is thinking that, well, I need to completely change this giant thing about my life in order to like change this pattern. And that's actually where I think leaning into the North Node Taurus, because it's all about this balance and this integration between both sides. Taurus helps to teach us good habits, good routines that are really beneficial for us. So I don't know if you've ever read the book Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg.
I think I did. It was a while ago if I did. Yes.
Nice. Well, what I love about that book is that it's like, we don't need to make these giant changes. It's all about taking something that might seem really huge, like whether it's some sort of nutrition change that you want to make or like exercise change. And it's like, well, maybe, you want to be able to go for an hour run every day, but maybe all you need to do is put your running shoes by the door and just go outside for 5 minutes and come back in, so that you can train yourself into this like tiny habit. And it's really rerouting those neural pathways to actually make it easier, rather than, try to do this big thing. It doesn't work. So you give up and you just think you're no good. Like the Taurus Scorpio axis is all about self-esteem and self-worth too. So it's like when you try to do something or make a change that's so big and then you kind of psych yourself out, it kind of makes it harder to get started again, or you start to get into these patterns of not being able to change. So that's a really big dynamic with the Taurus Scorpio I've noticed.
So Nura, what would you advise for people to do between now and the end of the year to get ready for these shifts? So it sounds like the Saturn in Aquarius, we're going to be like deepening into. We've been in it this year, but we're going to have more of it. Jupiter in Pisces is going to be a little bit new, although we did taste it a little bit in 2021. And this nodal shift is going to be new. What would you say people could be doing? Because I know a lot of people are very concerned about the state of the world, the state of their lives. There's a lot of unknown as we go from 2021 into 22. There's a lot of question marks still. What would you say would be a great strategy or something that people can really focus on as they look towards what's coming next?
I have a few, and it depends on your how deep you want to use the astrology tool. Yeah. So of course, first and foremost, if you know your chart, know where the South Node is in your chart, because that's going to show you some energy that you're purging, right? It's going to show you this is likely the area of your life that you might have to confront some things, because that's the nature of Scorpio's game. It's like, we're going to confront anything and everything in the way of your soul evolution. So that's where it might be a little bit difficult. So when you're aware of, okay, like this is where it's going to be difficult. Okay, cool. Got that. I can start to prepare my support team, my support system around that. I can look at where the North Node in Taurus is to see, okay, this is where I can start to craft some new routines. The North Node in Taurus is eventually going to come to a conjunction with Uranus, and a beautiful Uranus mantra: choose change before change chooses you. So if there's something that you know that you need to change, just do it. That's kind of that's the message there, because take those tiny steps, kind of build those tiny habits with Taurus. I think listening to your body, because Taurus is all about embodiment. Your body knows if something is right or wrong for it. Coming through the heart, exactly like you said, like filtering all of the information that we've learned through the heart and then deciding, rather than kind of getting caught up and feeling like you need to make an urgent decision about something that could influence your whole life, right? Mm-hmm. Like, don't make decisions out of fear. That's the Scorpio South Node. Make decisions out of grounded embodiment, because that's the Taurus North Node. So noticing first where that's in your chart. Second, what are the planetary rulers of both of these North and South Node? And this is where you can kind of have fun with the transits and do some transit tracking. So, the North Node in Taurus is ruled by Venus. So you want to know, where is Venus? And Venus changes on an average, like month to month basis. And so she's going to show you, well, this is where you can harmonize. This is where you can put your creative energy to manifest or attract or magnetize to you what it is that would be most helpful for you. And then if you look at Scorpio, I like to use both the modern and the traditional rulership for Scorpio. So Mars and Pluto. So Mars, again, shifts about every month, sometimes 2 months, depending on his orbit. Pluto stays in the same spot for a long time. So we know, okay, the Pluto and Capricorn kind of observing the dismantling of society. Like a question that I've asked a lot of people over the past year, because this has been going on for a long time, is your purpose, your soul purpose doesn't really change just because the external changes. Like what gifts you have and the things that you came here to do don't change just because that job title or job description doesn't exist out in the world. It's like if you're a teacher, you're a teacher. It doesn't really matter who you're teaching, right?
Yeah.
If you're a guide, if you're a coach, if you're a healer, if you're a doctor, like you carry that with you wherever you go. So it seems to me like the Scorpio sort of transformation, maybe, bringing in some adaptability and flexibility, creativity of how that's going to look. Like, how does that look in the shifting paradigm? Like you still take your gifts with you. You don't have to abandon them. I think that.
Yeah. And what do you have anything that you'd like to say about the Pluto return for the United States?
I think really, if anything, coming back to trusting in yourself, trusting in your ability to change with the changes. I think that we're going to see some big changes. I think we've already witnessed a lot. There's been unrest. There have been, a lot of big situations going on where it can feel very easy to feel like impotent because you're just like out of control. Like it's not in your control. You can't necessarily do something about every situation around the world. And it's like we can witness the suffering of another and we can hold space and we can send prayers and sometimes we can send money and sometimes we can like do something in our small pocket, but we can't do that for everyone everywhere around the world necessarily all the time. So I think just being really gentle with ourselves as we're witnessing these changes, with the general Pluto and Capricorn energy, I think this has been an opportunity for all of us to embody our internal authority and not default to external authority to know what to do. So if we are really strong in our internal authority, it's a lot less easy to be like, just have the rug pulled out from under you because you're not dependent on something outside of you. So I think independence, interdependence, community, support is a big strategy that I think it will be very beneficial. If we know who our people are, if we know where we can find grounding when everything else is in chaos.
Wow. So you would anticipate more change, more transformation, more, and that when we are more anchored in ourselves and who we are and our own bodies and selves as the authority, that's the biggest strategy for the time forward.
Yeah, that's what I work with. I mean, that could obviously be taken to, more specifics for every person's individual chart, of course. But yeah, I think big words that have come up for me are sovereignty, and I hear that word everywhere. So that's how I know it's a big word. It's not just me saying it. So sovereignty, what does that mean to you? Like, what comes up for you when you hear that word? What does, taking authority of your own life mean? And then how does that translate in terms of how you connect with society and the new changes? I really believe we get to create the society that we want to live in. It's not just up to somebody outside of us. And when we kind of take that power back for ourselves, I also think in that space, we then get to see our own gifts, our own creativity. It's like, oh gosh, I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it's like, there's a quote that's saying like every business or every entrepreneurial experience is born from a place of need. Like you see that there's need outside of you. And then you're like, well,
Yes.
I don't know how to fill that need. So I'm going to go do it. I'm going to start this business, or I'm going to do this thing. And that's how things shift. So I feel like, Pluto and Capricorn, that essence of, entrepreneurship, like, what are you building? There's something being built here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity in that way.
So continuing to follow that impulse and that passion where you're feeling lit up, where you're feeling drawn, and yeah, we're building something that we don't know what it's going to look like yet. And I love what you say about the word sovereignty. I remember when I was going through my divorce, I was realizing how codependent we had been on each other, and how I rarely said the word I. It was always we. Like I would just say we this, we that, we. Like even when I told stories, it would be we, not I. So I was exploring this idea of sovereignty and like, what does that even mean? And I realized I couldn't spell it. I was like, I literally don't even know how it's spelled. Like I know so little about sovereignty that I can't even spell it. But it was such an amazing thing to go through, is to be like, well, what does that mean? And what does it even look like? And how can I be sovereign and interdependent at the same time? How, like, what does it look like when I'm fully who I am, and I'm partnered up with someone who's fully who they are, and we're bringing our gifts, and together we're even better. Like that
Yeah.
seems like the ideal scenario, right?
Yes, yes. I hear all of that. Are you part of the Pluto and Libra generation?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's a really big one.
How did you know? Yes, Pluto and Libra. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely a big one, and definitely very fruitful. It was like very fruitful exploration. And so to hear that we are all in that place, exploring that is really a great thing. Nura, one more question for you. What is one of your favorite astrological tools or techniques?
I am really big on cyclical wisdom. So I'm a transits girl. Like I love to look at where you are in relation to your own life cycles, right? Like every 12 years we all go through a Jupiter return. Every year we have a solar return. I mean, birthday. I don't say happy birthday to anybody anymore. I just say happy solar return.
And have like more than half of the people, 90% of the people are like, what are you even talking about? No, probably 99% of the people really. Yeah, but that's great. Then they're curious, like, ooh, what's a solar return? Then you get to tell them.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything is orbiting. And what I love so much about that is you get to see how it's kind of like, the acorn oak tree story, where it's like everything you are is already contained within you, but there are seasons and certain parts of your life where this part is going to bloom. And so I really view that. For me, it's been one of the most hopeful ways to use astrology, because I'm like, oh, I want this thing. I know this thing that I'm supposed to do, but like, okay, next year's the time, or like at this date. So I can kind of strategize my life according to where I am in my own cycles. And then I can also, it's one of the first things that I do when I'm reading a chart too. It's like, I want to know where this person is in their cycles, because this is going to be something that they're really focusing on. So it just helps to, yeah.
So good. Yeah. I mean, and I feel so many of our struggles is when a lot of times, especially people that do vision or do, dream about their lives and what they would like to be and accomplish. And then it's like, well, why aren't I doing that right now? Like, and why I tried it, but it didn't work. So maybe I'm a failure. Maybe it will never work. It's like, well, actually, maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe there will be a season, and those seeds are already in you. That's why you're seeing it. That's why you're sensing it, but it's just not right in this moment. So just keep working towards it in any way that you can. Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Nura, so wonderful to meet you and be able to share this time with you and to introduce you to our community, and just looking forward to more opportunities to connect with you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was so fun to talk with you.
Good. Yay, Nura, thank you. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.